the knock never came. Instead, the door flew open, and so did the nightmare. For 68-year-old Jack McKinley, a retired U.S. Army Master Sergeant, that quiet Tuesday morning should have been like any other. A cup of coffee, a walk with Ranger, his golden retriever, and PTSD service dog, and the simple peace of his suburban life. But that peace was shattered in an instant when a SWAT team, acting on flawed intelligence, mistook his home for a drug den. Without warning, weapons were drawn, orders shouted, and before Jack could say a word, a taser dropped him to the ground. Ranger barked desperately, trying to protect his handler, unaware that the officers saw him not as a service animal, but as a threat. Jack, stunned and disoriented, lay cuffed on his own porch while heavily armed strangers tore through his home. The raid wasn't just a mistake. It was a betrayal. A man who had worn the uniform with honor, who had served under fire, was now treated like a criminal in his own home because of a simple address mix-up, 121 Oak Street instead of 123. The incident wasn't just a violation of Jack's rights. It was a gut-wrenching reminder that even heroes can be forgotten, overlooked, or worse, targeted. But this tragedy was only the beginning. What came next would reveal not just a mistake, but a reckoning. The moment Jack McKinley opened his front door, everything he knew about safety and trust was obliterated. The morning had started like any other for the 68-year-old retired Master Sergeant. Coffee, routine, and a walk with Ranger, his loyal service dog trained to help him manage the haunting scars of war. But the second he stepped outside, he was met by a sea of tactical gear, flashing laser sights, and adrenaline-fueled commands. Within seconds, Jack was tased and collapsed onto his own porch, utterly helpless. The officers had the wrong house. What followed was a cascade of catastrophic decisions. The SWAT team, acting on outdated and unchecked information, had stormed 121 Oak Street Jack's house rather than 123 Oak, the actual location tied to a narcotics suspect. Despite the obvious signs that Jack was no threat, an elderly man in casual clothes, hands empty, and a clearly vested service dog at his side, the team treated him as if he were armed and dangerous. His pleas went unheard. His dog's protective posture was mistaken for aggression, and his long years of honorable military service ignored entirely. As officers breached his home, overturning furniture and shouting commands, Jack lay on the ground in shock, pain surging through his body. Ranger barked and whimpered beside him, confused and terrified. A younger officer had called for the taser the moment Ranger growled protectively, not out of violence, but instinct. The leash slipped from Jack's convulsing hand. He couldn't speak. He couldn't move. He could only watch, disbelieving, as his home, the very symbol of the peace he had earned, was reduced to a war zone. This wasn't just poor execution. It was a failure of judgment at every level, a failure to verify critical information, a failure to distinguish between threat and misunderstanding, and perhaps most damning of all, a failure to recognize the face of someone who had already risked everything for the country he called home. What happened to Jack wasn't a one-off accident. It was a reflection of a growing problem where protocols and procedures overshadow the humanity behind the uniforms, where rushed action replaces thoughtful verification, and where someone like Jack McKinley, a man who served with honor, becomes just another line item in a report labeled incident. But this story, while heartbreaking, also planted the seeds of accountability. The misstep would soon catch the attention of someone who not only knew Jack's name, but remembered exactly who he was. And that memory would prove powerful enough to shift the tide, turning chaos into clarity and restoring the honor Jack deserved. Just when it seemed the morning couldn't grow any darker. The sound of salvation rolled in not sirens, but the steady, thunderous hum of military engines. The SWAT team had barely begun to register the depth of their mistake when the unmistakable sight of olive-drab Humvees turned the corner onto Oak Street. This was no routine backup call. The National Guard had arrived, and they weren't there for a parade. Major General Samuel Armitage, commander of the state's National Guard, and a seasoned veteran, stepped out of the lead vehicle. His crisp uniform, adorned with 2 gleaming stars, made it immediately clear. This was no low-level response. What most didn't know was that General Armitage and Jack McKinley went way back years ago. During a fiery battle overseas, Jack had saved Armitage's life by dragging him out of a burning vehicle. That unshakable bond now came full circle in a suburban neighborhood, half a world away. The general hadn't come by chance. Moments before Jack had been tased, he had managed to send a brief text to a friend at a veterans advocacy group. That group, outraged by the SWAT team's brutal mistake, immediately contacted the governor's office. In turn, the governor authorized a swift intervention, sending General Armitage and a rapid response National Guard unit to defuse the chaos and protect Jack. When Armitage saw his old friend bruised, trembling, still twitching from the taser sitting amid shattered furniture and barking officers, something changed in his expression. It was fury, yes, but also heartbreak. Kneeling beside Jack, the general spoke with calm authority. "It's Sam, Jack. I'm here now. Are you okay?" The relief in Jack's eyes said it all. Amid the wreckage, there was finally someone who recognized not just what had happened, but who it had happened to. Armitage wasted no time. He ordered the SWAT team to stand down and hand over all reports and evidence to his command. "Your authority ends here," he told Captain Miller, who looked stunned and deeply out of his depth. The National Guard took over immediately, securing the correct property 123 Oak Street and detaining the real suspect with professionalism and care. No unnecessary force, no confusion, just clean, disciplined action. A military medic checked Jack's vitals, while a vet team examined Ranger, who was still clinging to Jack's side. Even in pain, Jack's first words were for his dog. "Make sure he's all right." The general nodded. "He'll be fine. And so will you." It was more than reassurance, it was a promise. Armitage then made a call to the governor, ensuring that Jack's home would be repaired, that he'd receive proper care, and that there would be a full state investigation into how such a catastrophic error had happened. It wasn't just about one man's dignity, it was about setting a precedent. A line had been crossed. And now, someone was finally drawing it back. In that moment, Jack wasn't just a wronged veteran. He was a symbol. And the presence of the National Guard wasn't just a show of force, it was a reminder that honor, once earned, must always be defended. Even when the enemy isn't foreign, but systemic failure at home. When a man in uniform knelt beside Jack McKinley, it wasn't fear he felt, it was recognition. And for the first time that morning, a voice spoke not with authority, but with empathy. "Jack, it's Sam Armitage," said the general quietly, as if speaking to a brother. For Jack, still dazed, his chest aching from the taser, His porch littered with splintered wood and spilled memories, those words carried weight heavier than any badge. They were spoken by a friend, a fellow soldier, and the one man who understood exactly what honor meant, because Jack had once saved his life under fire. Major General Samuel Armitage wasn't just the highest-ranking officer in the state's National Guard. He was a man molded by combat, forged through service, and deeply committed to those who wore the uniform. When he received word that a retired Master Sergeant with whom he shared a battlefield history, had been wrongfully tased by local law enforcement in his own home, his reaction was swift and personal. He diverted his helicopter mid-flight, mobilized a quick reaction force, and landed straight onto Oak Street not to posture, but to protect. What he saw confirmed his worst fears. Jack's home was ransacked, his service dog Valor shaken, and Jack himself bruised and humiliated, surrounded by SWAT officers who looked more like invaders than public servants. As Captain Miller attempted to explain the procedural miscommunication, Armitage's face hardened. "You tased a decorated soldier on American soil on his porch because your team failed to verify an address," he said, his voice tight with anger. "There are no protocols that justify this." His words were not a reprimand. They were a verdict. Armitage immediately relieved the SWAT team of their authority at the scene, directing his troops to take control of the area and secure both 121 and 123 Oak Street. His men moved with calm professionalism, starkly contrasting the chaos earlier. The real suspect, quietly watching from the shadows of the neighboring house, was apprehended within the hour. No resistance, no injuries, just due process done right. Meanwhile, Jack received not just medical care from a National Guard medic, but something far rarer: dignity. The general made a second call, this time to the governor, demanding full repair and restitution for Jack's home, and a comprehensive review of law enforcement protocol regarding warrant service. "This wasn't a simple mistake," he told the governor. "This was a breach of trust, and it cannot happen again." But perhaps the most telling moment came when Armitage helped Jack to his feet and said, "You didn't deserve this, and it's our job now to make it right." He didn't speak to a victim. He spoke to a brother in arms. The taser marks would fade. The porch would be rebuilt. But the power of that moment, a general kneeling beside a soldier wronged, would echo far beyond the end of the block. It reminded all who watched that accountability doesn't trickle down. Sometimes it must storm in, boots first, to lift up the people forgotten in the noise. When the dust settled, what remained wasn't just damage, it was resilience. Jack McKinley's front door had been kicked in. His service dog, Valor, had been wrongly seen as a threat. And Jack himself, a decorated Army veteran, had been handcuffed and tased on his own porch due to a case of mistaken identity. But what followed was not silence, it was action. The National Guard didn't just leave once the SWAT team backed down. Under the direction of General Armitage, they stayed. They cleaned Jack's home, repaired what was broken, and even fixed a leaky faucet he'd long ignored. Military medics checked on both Jack and Valor, ensuring they were okay not just physically, but emotionally. Support poured in from neighbors who once barely knew Jack. Food arrived, kind words were spoken, and a quiet man who had lived in the shadows of war found new respect in his own neighborhood. The governor issued a public apology, and law enforcement reforms were promised. Jack declined most of the settlement money, instead choosing to support veteran programs and service dog training. He didn't want wealth, he wanted change. Life lesson: In a world that often forgets its quiet heroes, Jack's story reminds us that dignity can be shattered in a moment, but it can also be restored through courage, community, and accountability. Sometimes the greatest strength lies not in force, but in standing up for what's right, especially when the system fails. If this story moved you, leave a comment below, honoring a veteran you know. Don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories where justice, compassion, and courage still matter.